With that, I'm going to hand it over to Erin Perrine, the Principal Deputy Communications Director for the Trump campaign. So, Erin, we've seen Joe Biden kind of resurface. He went on a little brief hiatus where we didn't see him for a while, but now he's coming out during this coronavirus pandemic and trying to frame himself as a leader during these trying times. Do you think he's doing a good job at doing so?
Joe Biden is woefully ill-equipped to try and be a leader during a pandemic, certainly coronavirus. His track record is one thing because it shows how inept he was to step up to and take charge of a national crisis facing America. Not only is he woefully ill-equipped, seeming to not be able to handle any level of interview in his basement in Delaware, but he also is just woefully unprepared to lead because he has not been honest with the American public. Time and again, he has put out lies. He has put out falsehoods about what the president is doing, and his advisors are doing the same thing, and the media is not holding them to account. Joe Biden has said that the president called this a hoax. That's a lie, that the president should use the Defense Production Act. Well, Joe, he did, and he's using it to have companies step up. And the good thing is the president hasn't needed to go and fully use that all across the board because companies are stepping up in America to help address the crisis, to join President Trump and his leadership in tackling the pandemic facing America. Joe Biden is showing time and again when he is faced with a task to actually try and lead, he is ill-prepared and certainly not ready to be president.
And when it comes to these kind of issues, it's kind of cyclical for me. So, for example, when President Trump was being criticized for the child separation policy, Joe Biden didn't get criticized for that, even though that policy started back under the Obama administration. When, for example, President Trump was criticized about his China trade practices, Joe Biden wasn't criticized for his NAFTA support, which saw U.S. productivity go down. And now we're looking at this with face masks. Joe Biden has been very critical about testing kits, about face masks, but reports came out over the weekend saying the Obama administration failed to reproduce or kind of ramp up production of those N95 masks. So is this a problem that you see for the Trump campaign moving forward? Is that the media is very much so one-sided in its criticisms?
It's true. The media is very one-sided in their criticisms, and it has been the task and the work of the Trump campaign to get out there and push the facts out there. Like you mentioned, the N95 mask, the fact that the national stockpile was diminished and never replenished under the Obama-Biden administration. But then they want to turn around and try to blame President Trump. When President Trump has time and again stepped up, worked with public and private partnership to make sure that American hospitals, that the American public and that the American people have the resources they need in a time of crisis. Joe Biden has shown every time he thinks that he's going to land a punch on President Trump, what do you know? A little bit of fact comes up and a good bit of history about what Joe Biden actually did when faced with a similar crisis. He has no idea what he's doing to try and be a leader. He thinks that if he mimics what President Trump is doing, he's going to look like a leader. But all he does is look lost and confused because it takes them 6 days to put out their podcast about how they would address the crisis when numbers and situations and the facts are changing so rapidly based on what's going on actually in America. Governors across this country, Republicans and Democrats alike, are applauding President Trump for his leadership, for being able to bring private and public partnership together to make sure that states have the resources they need, to not be demanding things of these states, to make sure that they are addressing their needs with the support of the federal government behind them. Joe Biden doesn't understand that because all he's ever understood is the bigger the government, the better the policy. That's not always the case. President Trump is showing with tactful leadership what it looks like to allow the full resources of the federal government to be there without the mandate of the federal government on top of it.
And Erin, a point that was brought up to me by one of my colleagues who's a Senator Sanders supporter, which I thought was kind of interesting, is that Joe Biden is oftentimes on the wrong side of history and that his political type of clout comes from him trying to make up or explain that difference. I mean, we could go back to him kind of advocating for cutting Social Security. We could talk about his vote on the Iraq War, his support for NAFTA, TPP. Those are all type of things that President Trump used against Hillary Clinton on the debate stage. And there were talks for a while that maybe President Trump wouldn't participate in the debates, kind of citing that media bias that we were talking before. But if it's Joe Biden on the stage, do you think that President Trump has a very good matchup against Biden in those debates?
the best debater in the United States is President Trump. We've seen that. We saw the debate between him and Hillary Clinton, just how he dominated that room and dominated that conversation because he used his facts and his wit and his ability. He's an even stronger debater now as president of the United States. And Joe Biden, I mean, if he didn't have double standards, he certainly wouldn't have standards at all, because all he does is flip and flop and try to catch up and try to be something he's not. He is not the world-class leader that President Trump is. He is not a sure-footed individual to be taking on President Trump, and certainly not a qualified individual to be leading this country during this kind of crisis.
Yeah, and I guess the American people are kind of deciding that it was between Senator Sanders or Joe Biden. They've sided with Biden, but now I guess the big one that we're looking for is the general election matchup. That's the big one. It's coming sooner than we'd like to expect, and coronavirus is going to be front and center, I think, of that debate. So, Erin, I really appreciate you coming on, for kind of breaking this down for us. Thank you.
Thank you.